Oh my god, new egg, it's purple Gypsyros? Sure, why not? Ladies, gentlemen, and monsties of all ages, we're building up steam heading right towards the release of Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection, and I am so excited for this game. I loved the previous Stories games, especially the amount of depth and content that they had in Stories 2, and the multiplayer side of that game was a lot of bonus fun as well. And I think Stories 3 is shaping up to just look even better, like more of the same, but done in even better ways. So today I'm going to talk about why I am excited for Stories 3 specifically, and I'll of course mention any new information that has been revealed since the last time that I updated you guys on the game back in early December. That said, let's start with the story. The story is going to be much more mature, with the player character literally being older, and you can see this very clearly in this art that was directly shared from the devs, showing the relative height of each of the main characters, the protagonists from each Stories game, and showing how we've gone from being a proper child in the first game to a full-on proper human person now. Not to imply that children aren't like human, but they're not complete yet. They're undergoing maintenance. Beyond the protagonists themselves, there's a much more serious and dire situation going on in the world. The story itself is darker. Not only an existential threat from something infecting nature, which is a common thread through all the Stories games, but this time the threat of war between humans, between riders, and between monsties. And yet even through that, it seems like we'll have the same sort of humor around too, which is a big part of the charm of Stories in my opinion. And then mechanically, there's lots of cool stuff going on, like the habitat restoration system, where you've got endangered species type monsters, and if you find their eggs and you hatch them, you can then release them into the wilds to basically heal the ecosystem back up. You can level the ecosystem by doing this, and this has mechanical results of you being able to find stronger and more interesting monsties. Like, this is the main way that you get element and color swapped monsties in Stories 3, which is a mechanic that's returning properly, or in some cases you can unlock variants or deviant monsters through this, like we have seen Dread Queen Rathian confirmed as an unlock through this system, which is just a great example of what it could be used for. That to say, this system as a whole, the ecosystem restoration, is something that I'm super interested in because it just feels like an incredibly immersive way to do a progression in a Stories game. Not only does it fit in perfectly with our character being a ranger, which is a group of riders that exist to try and protect and heal the surrounding environments, and we do so by helping endangered species recover, literally through the gameplay itself, not just through the story, but through the gameplay, and taking out the invasive species that are causing the issues to begin with, of course, to make the species not be in danger of being endangered. The invasive species are causing a ruckus as a direct result of the crystal encroachment, and that is the big bad natural threat that's taken over the lands, or I guess an unnatural threat. It is crystallizing entire areas, causing monsters to flee their homelands and become invasive species, causing eggs to get crystallized and lost just the same way that our protagonist Rathalos was, the skyscale Rathalos, which is our special story companion in Stories 3. And this even extends to the point that we have seen footage, very briefly mind you, of a crystal encroached feral yama tsukami, who is one of my favorite monsters that has not been in a mainline series game since the second generation, but is now in Stories 3 as a fightable creature. I have no expectations that he will be an actual monstie just because of his pure size. I would love him to be, but I don't think he will be, but he is a monster, and he's going to be a very imposing fight by all imagination. Beyond that, the charm level just oozing from this game is so high on the whole. Even things like now we can finally ride Plesioth, who has existed as an enemy monster in the previous Stories games, but not a monstie in the previous ones. And his actual like walking animation while you're riding on top of him is absolutely hilarious. And this brings me to the point that you can just actively swap monsties at will while riding. It's simpler than ever, and this is to intentionally make traversal in the open world much smoother and more enjoyable too. Like, you can swap from a swimmer to a jumper to a flyer in the blink of an eye. Speaking of eyes, fun fact, Odogaron cannot blink because it does not have eyelids. Second fun fact, Odogaron is expected to be in Stories 3 due to this red and black fanged wyvern egg pattern egg. This then becomes even more important, the fact that you can switch between monsties at will like that, when you take in the size of the world, the depth of the world, and especially the verticality of areas that they've shown off so far. The actual overworld open areas are seemingly much more involved than the previous Stories games. And on a side note of that, one of the new things that we've been getting to see in footage, like from a presentation that happened just earlier today as part of the regular Capcom TV streams that they do, we got to see the inside of some monster dens. Dens are accessed from the overworld, and inside of them are where you find monster nests. Interact with the nest to dig through them to search for eggs, and those eggs are what you use to hatch the actual monsties from. In Stories 2 specifically, most dens were at least a couple of rooms, things to collect or encounter, a monster at the nest itself of course, whereas in Stories 3, at least in the examples of early game dens that we have been shown, they are basically just a very tiny condensed area right in front of the entrance. Sometimes there is a sleeping monster guarding them, but not even directly on top of the nest, more further back in the area, and you can also even have dens that have multiple nests instead of just one of them now, and you can keep one egg from each nest per den. So if a den has 2 nests, you can get 2 eggs. Now imagine what happens if you can have that trigger on like a super rare den, or hey, we don't know how far this goes either, maybe endgame super rare dens will have like 3 or 4 nests to make them just really feel like a properly exciting reward for finding something very uncommon. Obviously, that's just speculation. All we know for sure is that you can have 2 nests in a den, and the concept alone of that being possible, along with the dens being smaller and the open world being a larger focus as well, it all sounds like a very fun direction to take stories moving forward, in my opinion. Like a good set of positive changes from the previous entries, but also they make sense when you put all of these changes together as well. Beyond that, the monsties are great. I mentioned that plesioth is now a ridable monstie in Stories 3, but beyond that, we know of things like Ratha, magnamalo, Ratha, and the devs even cheesed Arkveld as a monster that will be in the game, saying his kinship attack is incredible, which then of course implies that he will be a ridable monstie too. And we've got a whole new egg pattern and color that we hadn't seen in any previous Stories game, which we're all assuming to be Carapaceons, and specifically this one being Shogun Ceanataur, which I am so excited about. I am really happy if we get to ride crabs. As well, there was more information from the presentation I mentioned before, the one that happened earlier today. We had another monstie confirmed for the game, which is just the return of purple Gypsaros, whose egg is the purple and green bird wyvern pattern. As well, while I don't know if or how this will extend to our own monsties personally, I love the visuals of the armored monsties that people are riding in the trailers, the ones that are going to war. Obviously, it's meant to emphasize that they are being used for battle and that it's a bad thing and stuff like that, but I can't help but think they look badass, and I would love the ability to armor up my own buddies in the game too. The characters all seem to have a ton of personality, which isn't necessarily unusual for the Stories game series, but it's nice to see that with all this effort they put into expanding the gameplay and the mechanics and deepening the world and making the story more mature and serious and stuff, that they haven't left the characters themselves by the wayside. And seemingly most of our actual interactable friends on the journey will be the Ranger Squad, who range from big tough lady to old cookie scholar to fresh-faced newbie who has an unnatural obsession with poogies that I completely respect. And these characters even get their own crazy special moves too, which are very cool to see in action in the game. As well, they've said there will be actual side stories for these characters, which is like a character-specific side quest chain that will of course teach you more about them, but it will also make that character stronger, unlock the ability for them to use different weapon types, and even have different monstie partners with them, which really expands the way that you can prepare yourself for team-based battling. And there's even a bit of an ominous cloud above one character's head that I've been keeping an eye on. This is Simon. He is repeatedly told to us to be our best friend and fellow member of the Rangers, but there are various times in the promotional materials, the trailers, the screenshots, that they show the entire Ranger Squad, but not Simon. And so I'm really just getting attached to the mystery of why? Where is he? Does he betray us? Does he die? Am I crazy and just reading too far into the whole thing, into the limited information that we have so far? Any of those 3 things is entirely possible, as far as I'm concerned. Beyond that, there's the combat itself, and on a base level, there's Longsword in the game now, new to the story series, and it looks quite fun for sure. There's also a new powered up monster type related to the whole crystal encroachment system called feral monsters. These have the crystal encroachment growing on top of them. It affects their movesets and their fights on a deeper level as well. You can directly target the crystals, but doing so can actually result in damage reflecting back onto you. So you have to break the crystals to weaken their most dangerous attacks, but you have to be careful about how you do it, and more accurately, when you do it, purposefully waiting for the correct moment in the fight where it is safe to do so. So between these and the invasive species monsters fight as well, which also get unique moves compared to their normal movesets, we have 2 different monster variation types to create more interesting enemies to fight through the game, and add extra depth to combat beyond the rock, paper, scissors combat system too. There's also the Wyvern Souls gauge system at the top of the screen, which essentially works like a knockdown or stagger bar. If you deplete the layer, you will stagger the monster and skip that monster's turn. And if you fully empty the bar of all of its layers, you get a proper knockdown that lets you do a synchro rush attack. This is a new thing that is basically a timed button press to do a big, powerful, punishing attack with all friendly characters in the fight working together simultaneously. Beyond that, something that I am still really happy to see is just the pure amount of information that you can get from the UI in combat in Stories 3. Stuff like being able to see the full element resist chart for the monster that you are fighting against, or the fact that you can actively see how much damage each of their body parts has taken in a very visible way. Sure, for some, this level of UI might become a little bit overwhelming, but the way I see it is more information is just more power for the players. More knowledge gives you more agency in how you act in any given situation, and I think that it works great for the strategic turn-based combat system that Stories 3 will have. That just about does it for today then, everyone. I'm honestly just struggling to contain my own excitement, my own pure hype about Stories 3 as someone who absolutely adored Stories 2 and really liked Stories 1 as well. And so I wanted to just gush about the reasons why I feel this way, especially as we are getting closer to launch, and also mentioning these small bits of new information that we have had over the last month, as little as they've been, though we are expecting a larger information drop for this game to happen at some point in February, so keep your ears peeled. That's not how the saying goes. Please don't peel your ears. I hope you all enjoyed this, and let me know your own thoughts on Stories 3 so far in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.